This week, we welcome Antonio Sanchez, Principal Evangelist from Fortra, to discuss the cybersecurity workforce gap and insights from this year's RSA conference. In the enterprise security news, a slow week for funding, but as always, a busy week for AI news. Databricks acquires Okira, CrowdStrike, Fortinet, and other cybersecurity shares rise. Merck might finally get the $1.4 billion payout for NotPetya. Ex-Uber CISO Joe Sullivan won't go to jail. Google rolls out passkey support. Do bartenders make good pen testers? Maybe. We'll talk about that one a little more. ICS using stenography to hide data. DEF CON will unleash hackers on large language models and security's eternal prioritization problem. In our final segment, we air 3 pre-recorded interviews from ZScaler, Island, and Sumo Logic at RSA Conference 2023. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
When organizations face poor web performance, challenges building modern applications at scale, or need to reduce operational and development costs, they turn to Fastly. Fastly's distributed edge network means your business can unleash its growth potential without worrying about scaling your infrastructure, whether for growth of users, transaction volume, or geographic expansion. Get the speed, security, and edge cloud innovation you need to deliver profitable and engaging experiences. Visit securityweekly.com/Fastly for more information or to speak to an expert.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Eat What You Want Day. Okay, I'm going to eat what I want today. This is episode number 317, recorded May 11th, 2023. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, sitting in for Adrian, who is busy getting set up for B-Sides Knoxville. Joining me today as my co-host, first, Miss Katie Teitler. Welcome, Katie.
Hello, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. I miss you. It's always so fun to talk to you.
Yeah, I missed RSA this year, but that's okay. There's lots of other opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. This podcast, for one.
Right,
also
exactly. That's why we're here.
Right. Also joining, who I missed this week on my show, Mr. Tyler Robinson. Welcome, Tyler.
Hey, Matt. I don't like this, missing a week here and there. It's like the only time I get to see you, so it was definitely missing you as well.
Thank you. You bring great insights to the conversation. I miss it. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. This series of one-day invitation-only executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We are pleased to offer our listeners $100 off admission when you use the code SECWEEK23 to register. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more and register today. This segment is sponsored by Fortra. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Fortra. Antonio Sanchez serves as Principal Evangelist at cybersecurity and services provider Fortra. He has over 20 years in the IT industry focusing on cybersecurity, information management, and disaster recovery solutions to help organizations of all sizes manage threats and improve their security posture. Antonio is a CISSP and has held various leadership roles at Symantec, ForcePoint, and Dell. Antonio, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly.
Hi, thanks for having me here today, and thanks for letting me know that it's National Eat What You Want Day. Now I just got to figure out exactly what I want to eat today.
Yes. Yeah, Adrian always pulls in these national whatever days it is on his podcast. And the last time it was like National Beer Day or something like that, which was way more exciting for me than eat whatever you want, because I kind of do that anyways.
Well, it's the only reason I work out is just so I can eat what I want. So now I can do that today and not feel guilty about it.
Exactly right. So, Antonio, we wanted to start first a little bit on the workforce side, and it's interesting. We actually did a we have this segment on Business Security Weekly we call Say Easy, Do Hard. It's named after my co-hosts. He kind of coined this phrase. It's easy to say, it's much harder to do. So once a quarter, we do a Say Easy, Do Hard segment where we try to really break in and try to solve some of the really hard problems that are hard to solve. And the last one we did was on closing the skills gap. And the question that we wanted to answer first was, is it a shortage of talent or is it a skills gap? Because it's kind of interesting. Like, do we not have enough people, or do those people just not have the right skills to help us fill that gap?
It's a great question, and I've talked to different folks and have gotten different answers. But one of the answers that I keep hearing over and over is there's concern that while there may be some skills, there aren't the enough type of skills or able to demonstrate the type of skills that they want. Because in many cases, organizations, while they know there's a skill gap and they know there's people that want to learn, do they really want to take the time to teach them while they're safeguarding their organization? Somebody has to do it. Somebody needs to do it in order for them to show value to them as the organization. But somebody's also got to take the chance to be able to show them to do just those things. I mean, some of them can get it through education. Some organizations have great programs to be able to start them off at a beginner into a junior level, into a senior level. And with that, there's always a concern, are we going to take this time to bring these people up to speed and get them to where we want them, only to lose them to a competitor after we've invested so much into them? There's programs in different parts of the world where they're actually fast tracking professionals into that because the need is so great that they'd rather take them, even though they're junior level, to be able to put them in those roles, and whatever they can contribute is still better than what they had before. But in other places, it's kind of the mindset of, we don't necessarily want to take the time to get you there to then lose you. So it's organizations have to decide what works for them. So yeah, it's kind of classic chicken and egg conversation. I need a job so I can have experience, but I need experience to have a job. So it's kind of some of the same things that we're seeing. Although I did see some interesting things, not just at RSA, but also some previous cons that I've been to, where there's some organizations that are doing simulations as a service, where they'll test your expertise and they'll up-level your skill set, so that way you have some experience that you can at least demonstrate without actually being in the role. So I thought that was interesting use case, or interesting use of getting the people to up-level their skill set so that they can position themselves for those particular opportunities.
Do you think that's a better solution to the kind of traditional certificate route, where we're kind of iterating on the cert path and getting to a place where we have demonstratable skills that can be verified and certified?
Sorry, you came in and out, but I think what I heard you say is get demonstratable information. Well, yeah, just like you want to have some sort of artifact to be able to demonstrate your, credentials of whatever it is that you do, the same level of having that level of artifact to be able to demonstrate, I've done this type of training in a controlled environment. Here's where I did well. Here's where there were some opportunities for improvement. Here's what I did about them, and then re-demonstrating again. I mean, it's what a lot of organizations do as it relates to their security posture. This is where we are now. This is our point in time snapshot a month ago, 3 months ago. This is where we are today. This is how we show improvement. Same thing for the personal skills gap. So there's organizations that are coming out, and that's kind of what they're doing, is put them in a safe environment, sort of like a simulated rapid fire, see how they react, work with them to improve that, and then show them something that they can demonstrate to that potential employer. Like, this is what I've done, and I took this initiative to go do that, and I'm ready to take on that responsibility to protect this organization or help protect this organization.
So that seems to me like a really good way to up-level yourself or to build skills for incoming people. But I want to step back a little bit because it's the age-old problem, as you mentioned. If you don't have skills, you can't get a job, but how do you get skills if you can't get a job? Well, you just mentioned one thing, but that's at industry conferences, so they're not available to everybody, and it's expensive to even get there and get the pass. What are companies doing? Because I know that obviously there are a lot of security seats that aren't filled, and they're saying they don't want to take the time, as you said, to train people up, but then that leaves them without people. So it seems like a double-edged sword if you're making that decision. What do you see companies doing? Are they just leaving those positions open? Are they trying to move people through the organization who at least have some knowledge of it? What's really happening in most organizations? Because if you just leave those positions open, is that really better than having somebody with a little bit of knowledge?
Right. It's dependent on organization. I mean, it seems in some of the forums that I follow on various places seem to recognize that some organizations need to take the chance and give people opportunities to be able to come in as entry level, turn into junior, turn into senior. So there's some of that happening. For others, the organizations, or at least some of the things that, again, I'm seeing on some of the other communities that I'm involved with, they're getting experience through whether it be internships or even going through managed service providers, managed security services providers, where typically they can come in and they will have a program to be able to teach them and have a curriculum to be able to up-level their skills. And then yet for other companies, it's like, you know what, let's figure out how we can do more with what we have, whether that is, can we automate some of the things within our environment that would normally require a human? Are there repetitive things we can automate that used to require human intervention to be able to do that? But we've seen it enough times such that we can go ahead and automate those things, and that'll help relieve the burden. Or other option would be, do we bring in a partner of some sort to help us alleviate some of that burden that we would normally have, some of that operational burden of managing the security tech stack or a certain part of our security tech stack, let them deal with it, and and we give them the parameters of, if condition equals X, this is when we want you to engage with us directly versus this is how else we want to engage. So there's different options. They still need the security outcomes. They still need to have them for the ones that want the experience. There are a few avenues, but for the organizations that need to solve for it, if they can't figure it, their best bet is to either figure out how they can automate within their environment across their operations. If not, look to potentially bring in a partner to help them with that and relieve some of that burden for them.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. So I'm glad that you hit on that. You know, in a lot of cases, companies are reluctant to automate. They're nervous about the outcomes. And then there are those people who think that they're going to be automated right out of a job. That's absolutely not true. I mean, at least not in the foreseeable future. You need these co-pilot type of situations in your organization. But are you seeing more people embrace automation? Because I see it at my current company with what the product we offer, and in talking to other companies, knowing people are just hesitant about automation, even though some of those low-level tasks are really not necessary to be done by a human.
Right. Some of those low-level tasks, I mean, it's low value to be doing those. So yeah. Figuring out where to automate. And there's always that hesitancy because you hit it right on the head. What if I automate something and I have some unintended outcome where I get yelled at for stopping, a revenue generating asset, for instance, or I revoke a credential to an executive, that shouldn't have been revoked or something like that. But in the last few years, I mean, the number I keep seeing thrown around, and you've probably seen this, ISC Squared has quoted this a few times. The number tends to hover between 2.5 to 3 million unfilled jobs, and it always hovers around that job. And organizations are realizing that number is really not going to get much shorter or much smaller anytime soon. So they have to adopt automation to be able to help. But going back to there's plenty of opportunities to be able to see enough of the same repetitive action happening over and over and over. And maybe it isn't a full automation. Well, they say, if you see this action, go ahead and take X action. But rather, if you see this action, give a recommendation immediately to whoever the security leader is given the opportunity, we see this action, we recommend you take this action or do nothing or reassign it for more evaluation. And then this way you have the human to be able to interact and make a judgment call based on the context of the information that's given to them, and then go ahead and take that action. That's still better than manually doing anything, because you've automated part of the process and allow a human to be able to interact in the middle to be able to make the human decision before taking on whatever that final action is. So that's a way for organizations to step into automation. And then when they see things that are happening enough times and the highly repetitive stuff, and know that they're not, have with high confidence that they're not gonna, that the automated action they take, where usually they would do, there's a human checkpoint, it's like we can go ahead and let that happen because we've seen that happen enough and we know there's not going to be an unintended consequence. So it's about the willingness of the maturity of the organization to be able to embrace automation. And for the most part, the smaller the organization, it seems like the mid-sized customers, mid-sized enterprises are the ones that are jumping on board with that, because they don't have as deep of the pockets as, say, some of the Fortune 500 companies that can offer, a healthy compensation package to somebody with the skill set to maybe do some of those things. But even the bigger companies are doing the same thing, because complexity of those environments, where can they automate? It's where SOAR became so popular the past few years, where SOAR was a category, and then all of a sudden you had SOAR vendors become embedded SOAR capabilities, where you had a lot of other organizations that had embedded SOAR capabilities, so they can embed some of these automations within their tech stack.
What areas of automation are you seeing being highly successful for some of these organizations, right? There's the difference between automation and artificial intelligence, right? I don't think artificial intelligence in and of itself so far has proven that it can handle everything. So there's smart integrations of the AI, chatbots, all the machine learning of the world that we're trying to integrate into all of our tools. But then there's also the automation piece, which is completely separate and or can be integrated in together. So what parts are you seeing the companies are leveraging these things successfully, and what areas do you see that are a little immature still, and we still have a substantial amount of testing and vetting to do in order to get to a place where this is useful and from a budget and time constraint standpoint, viable for a business to actually leverage?
So a few places that we've seen are things like log review. I mean, just about every single compliance mandate requires some sort of level log review. Well, you've got logs coming in from a number of different sources, from your tech stack to your cloud security providers to your specific security stack, and being able to automate some of that to be able to eliminate that first line of noise, potentially even that second level of noise, so that way you can get to higher fidelity information that is more manageable for a human to be able to look at. Other places we've seen have to do with, if we think about EDR as a technology, EDR has some automation already built into it, because if it finds something malicious, it'll isolate a host off of a network. Other things that we've been seeing with some success include things like shunning an attacker, updating a policy to be able to block a certain IP, being able to disable credentials for any sort of event that has high confidence of being a compromised credential. So some things like that is where we're seeing it. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's multiple opportunities for things to happen. And in the world that we're kind of living in, the more that can happen at machine speed, the faster, because we're not going to stop all the bad guys from getting in, but the better we are at being able to help detect some of that and having some of these actions happen at machine speed and having a human interact in places where it makes sense before that action takes place is still better than before, to limit the potential impact of whoever it is that's gone through. And there's other use cases, provisioning systems. I mean, there's lots of places that is not necessarily always within the security part of the tech stack. It could be in the operational part of the tech stack. So like I mentioned ago, provisioning a new user, there's a lot of automations with there. And many times it's the workflows that they have built in. So some of the things that at least we've been seeing and talking with customers and partners as well.
No, those are great examples. Honestly, those are the examples I was hoping you would kind of use directly away from some of the security pieces. From the executive standpoint, take the opposite approach too. Maybe you haven't been using as much automation in your environment, or you've been hesitant to leverage some of the AI technologies, but you've got executives now where we have this as a common theme with inside of major main source news. Executives are talking amongst themselves, and they're bringing ideas and wanting to understand how we're going to leverage automation in the environment, in the enterprise. How are we going to deploy and leverage AI for our day-to-day use, or they want to bring it into the environment? What are some of the things that you guys are advising around that conversation with the executives at the executive level for the enterprise?
Okay, I'm sorry, having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. I don't know if it's just me. It was a little muffled, but I think what I heard you say is, what are the executives, or how are executives looking at that? I'm just having a hard time of hearing. I'm not sure if it's I'm having audio difficulties.
It may be on our side, but yeah, the executives. How are we bringing that conversation where the executives are asking, are we going to be delivering AI or using AI? How are we looking in the enterprise to begin implementing AI? What are some of the conversations around that from the executive and enterprise side, and things that executives are starting to talk about and ask about?
The things we're hearing executives are asking about is, does this help close the gaps? Does this help close some of the headcount gaps that we have? Does this put us at risk for something? I mean, there's always something in the news nowadays. It seems like you can't go a day without seeing some AI technology that put somebody's information on compromise. A certain generative AI company was in the news this week, or that last week, I think, for just that. But even at the executive level, I mean, at the end of the day, most executives that we've talked to are concerned typically with, does this help us either increase revenue? Does this help us increase market share? Does this help us reduce our costs? And if something fits within one of those three things, you kind of have their interest, because at the end of the day, there's not a single executive that I'm aware of whose goal is to be the most secure company in the world, the most secure organization in the world. They're concerned about, how is security going to enable the organization? Is this a technology that's going to enable us to be able to close some of the, whether it's the skills gaps or other types of headcount gaps that we have within the organization, that are going to support the business initiatives to be able to grow revenue, market share, or reduce their costs. So yeah, from that level, I mean, they don't get really as much into the tech unless they happen to see something in the news of something being, done, compromised, or something like that. But at least that's kind of the type of conversation that we're hearing.
Antonio, let's say that automation fixes a percent. Let's say it's 20% of the skills gap, right? Because I can optimize, maybe I don't need as many people. That still puts us at the 2 to 2.5 million mark, right? So then the question becomes, what else do we need to be doing as an industry? Because I think the old scenario was, people come out of the military, they go into financial services, they get trained up, then we hire them from the financial services companies and pull them out. That model's not going to survive. And if I decide not to hire them, and now I hire service companies, now I'm just putting the burden on the service companies to go train them up or hire these resources. So what else do we need to be doing? Because I think shifting it around isn't going to solve the core problem. It's just going to put it on somebody else's plate.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you're probably right. It probably does get us 20% there, or whatever that percentage there. But really, as an industry, we have to get better. We have to make things easier. We have to make things easier for customers. We have to make it easier for them to leverage the tools that are used to be able to protect their environments. Easier to manage just everything. So that burden really at the end of the day falls on the people like us, vendors like us, and making it easier to consume and to use their products and services. Because a portion of it will, automation will handle some of that. If you outsource some of that to another provider, okay, you've got another portion, call it another 20%, 30%. There's still that other percentage. Is it ever going to be 100? No. But it's probably why one of the things I notice at RSA and a few other conferences is that it seems like more and more organizations are going with platforms and trying to. It's becoming a platform world where how can we simplify how organizations are going to get to the next level, because we can't just transfer all of that burden on somebody else or expect somebody else to fix it. So we have to get, as a community, we have to get better. We have to place nice together, and we have to work together. Because I was in one of the sessions and one of the panel sessions, and one of the speakers said it's not us versus them. It's us. We all have something that we need to a part to play in that. But I think it starts with, kind of getting out of this mindset of I'm going to get this next tool for this next specific type of attack for this specific vector, which is why there's, what is it, like 4,000 or 4,500 vendors, which is more than 2x of what it was just 10 years ago. We have to say, we've got to make it easier. We've got to integrate more capabilities. We've got to make it easier for people to use the products. We've got to be able to enable the customers to be able to leverage as much of that as possible to be able to again continue to close that gap, because it doesn't seem like that gap is going to close anytime soon.
Right. And I think, look, the consolidation play is real. I see it every single day, right? Can I take my existing portfolio, consolidate it down to fewer vendors? Because one of the things that does is it just, maybe you need fewer resources, but you definitely kind of streamline the learning curve around products, right? And so I see this every day. We're never going to get down to one platform, or not even maybe 5 platforms. It was funny. I had was a guy from Salesforce, Renee will remember, but he said ZTN or Zero Trust is not a SKU. And he said it's not even 5 SKUs, right? I can't buy 5 platforms to cover Zero Trust, right? It's a little more than that. So, I mean, where do we get as an industry? Where do we see the consolidation, and kind of how does this play out? Does it come down to like 10 core vendors and that's it? We're done?
I mean, that'll be great to see. A lot of the organizations we speak to, the larger companies, 50, 60, 70, even 100 vendors that they have in-house. And to your point, some of those have platforms, and they have a lot of overlapping capability and technology. So the vendor consolidation, it's real. And is the number going to be 10? Is that the number that organizations are going to try to strive for? Maybe. If I'm a vendor, if I'm a company that has 100 vendors as part of my security stack, is my goal to get 10? Well, that's probably not realistic. Is my goal to get maybe 30? Possibly that might be more realistic, but part of that is just also understanding your environment, understanding how the data flows, understanding what you need to do to be able to protect that, and then being able to evaluate what are the things that are going to allow me to be able to do that, but scale even beyond what my data protection team has to do, as well as my vulnerability management team is going to have to do, and maybe even some of my operations team can be able to use as well, and scaling that down to something more manageable. But we've been hearing it a lot. It's like, it'd be great if somebody can do the hard part of just stitching this stuff together, all these things that are out there. Somebody go out there, stitch this stuff together, give it the same look, give it the same feel, make everything kind of behave the same as I need it to behave, to make it easier to adopt. So, is the number 10? Maybe that number is 15, but 10 and 15 are still better than 70. Yeah. So, time will tell. We'll wait and see. But that's one of the things that we're focused on, is to hopefully be one of those 10 or one of those 15 that provides something with a lot of capability.
Yeah, I did interview John Grinserich when we were at RSA. He runs your strategy side. I asked you before whether you reported to him or into Mike Devine, but that's where I see some very interesting movement with what you guys have done. I don't think people realize all the companies you've acquired, but more importantly, not just the acquisition, about how you've been stitching them all together to create a more cohesive platform, right? I mean, John was talking about this when I interviewed him at RSA a few weeks ago, of how deliberate you've been about making the look, the feel, everything very consistent. And I think that goes a long way when you start thinking about consolidation and the impact on skills. If everything works and feels the same off a common platform, the learning curve's less, and maybe the number of resources to manage it are less, which would be a benefit in this particular environment.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly what we're working towards, because again, we recognize the skills gap, we recognize the shortages, we recognize that it's probably gonna be around for at least the next 5 years. We recognize the requirements as it relates to automation as well. So we're trying to build some of that stuff also, and we also recognize that this is a fast-moving industry. The threat landscape moves faster than anything I've ever been a part of. There's always going to be a new attack, a new vector. So how can we best prepare to do that? And how do we build a solution that's going to be able to adapt as we go? Because at the end of the day, I mean, isn't that what we all have to do? We have to adapt to the next thing and the next thing. And the thing that we hadn't even thought about yet, there's always that new thing, that new attack vector that hadn't been there before. It wasn't that long ago, something like API security wasn't even a thing. What's an API? Who was working with APIs? And now there's organizations that do that. So yeah, that's the idea. That's the strategy. That's the hope that we're able to get to by being able to help organizations to be able to make it easier to consume the products, and hopefully build a solution that makes that learning curve a little lower and makes it less of a burden in the event that they do have turnover, and they can bring somebody else in and kind of pick up right where the last person left off.
So let's tie this into insights from RSA, because at RSA, I go to two primary places on the show floor, right? I go to Early Stage Expo, and I go to all the perimeters, right? Down the sides and the back. Like, I know all the guys in the middle. Like, I've been in the industry long enough. I know everybody in the middle. I want to see all the other ones. And here's my concern. We have a lot of Me Too's. Like, I went through Early Stage Expo. There were 4 island competitors in Early Stage Expo, all trying to build a secure browser. Like, do we need 5 secure browser technologies? Like, can people survive in these kind of point solutions? And so it was interesting for me to walk through the floor to think about how many of these guys can actually survive as a standalone, knowing what we just talked about: consolidation, platform, highly integrated. Do the point solutions have much of a chance? And did you see the same thing, or did I miss something?
So I typically, there's a few things I do aside from catching some sessions here and there that I always learn something from. For me, I like learning kind of the legal side, so the law related kind of stuff about security. But I do the same thing. I walk the show floor. I'll do a loop around the entire floor. I'll see who's up at the front. I'll see who's in the back, who's in the sides, and see some ahas. And some of the vendors that I see in there, it does make me wonder, are they really, one of however many 5 or 10 in this particular category? Are they really committed to doing that, or are they out there to maybe hopefully get bought by somebody? Because there's a lot of folks that do that as well. The number of vendors that came up to our booth and asked us about partnership opportunities and filling a gap in what we do, because while we have a great portfolio, we don't do everything. I don't think any company does everything unless you're one of these, mega large integrators that can choose whoever they want. But there were people that were walking us that were interested in saying, hey, we're interested in some partnership opportunities. Hey, we've got this right here. Is that something your organization might be interested to add to your portfolio? Kind of hinting at potentially acquiring. I mean, we'll have to ask other people about that, but that happens as well. I'll tell you one of the aha moments, or one of the surprise moments that I had at RSA, and this is my first RSA since 2019. When I used to go to RSA in Black Hat, I would see the FBI booth on the outskirts, on the edge, in the middle. This past RSA, they were in the main part of the floor, in the middle of the floor, and they had FBI and NSA next to each other, and then a few feet over, they had CISA over there as well. Wow, I've never seen NSA or CISA at one of these. Maybe they were there last year or the year before, but in years past, I've never seen them there either. So, they're doing some things. So I also take notice of who's in the main part of the room versus who's on the outskirts. And as far as the entrance, in particular category, I mean, we could argue that with a number of things, like if you look at some of the original SIM vendors, and then some of the vendors that came out a few years ago that were in the UEBA market, and then those that turned from UEBA to next gen SIM, and then look at the number of endpoint security vendors. It seems like for a while there were a bunch every few years. There's new email security vendors, and email security has been around for the longest time. So there's always going to be kind of a new vendor or a new somebody new to enter into the space. And it really depends on what is it that you're able to do. What is it you're able to do different? How well do you integrate? Because nowadays that's what customers want to know, is how well do you play in the sandbox with this organization and that organization and this provider and that provider. If they have something that's of value, I mean, that's why people are taking notice, and that's why they're doing that. Now, let's wait and see 5 years from now how many of those are still there versus how many of them get scooped up potentially versus maybe the ones that don't make it. But it's a little surprising. But at the end of the day, when you take a step back and you look at the history of some of these categories out there, like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. You have multiple that are in the same type of category.
Yeah, when money was cheap, it was one thing. Money's a lot harder to get these days, and I think it's really interesting to see how many of these guys survive with I'm just going to build the next gen of X, Y, and Z. Because I think some of the established players in the market are going to be really hard to rip and replace out in a consolidated kind of flat budget cycle. I'm not sure all the startups have figured that out yet, but from what I see on the enterprise side, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the organizations are taking longer to make their decisions. They're scrutinizing to a new level. In some cases, especially with some of those lesser known organizations, they want to know the health of the organization before deciding to pull the trigger. I've been at startups in my career. I was a part of those conversations, or I knew those conversations were happening where they wanted to see the books. Now, whether or not they allow a potential client to see their books, who knows? But yeah, I mean, sales cycles are taking longer because they are putting much more scrutiny into what they do. And not only that, but they want to ensure that for a vendor that they say, hey, you told me that you can do this. I want you to show me you can do it and show me that it's real, versus saying, oh, we're doing all these things and we can promise you the world that we're the greatest things in sliced bread. And then when it comes right down to it, you realize that they couldn't do everything that they said they could do.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing POCs to prove it out before they buy. I'm seeing scrutiny on every single renewal. Renewals are being scrutinized across the board. It used to be if it was in the budget, it just went through. But now every renewal is going through is almost as much scrutiny as a brand new purchase these days, which is it's squeezing the little guys. I'm just telling you, right? And I think that's where the larger platform, larger capability companies have an advantage in the current market right now, only because they can offer more as part of a contract instead of piecing a bunch of things together. And I think that's the paradigm we're going to be in for through the rest of this year, well into next year. And the question will be, how long does it go after that until money gets easy again?
Absolutely. And you consider the turnover that happens at the leadership level of most of these organizations. I mean, every new leader is going to always scrutinize every dollar that's being spent, because in some cases they're walking into something and they're unsure what that is. So they're going to scrutinize, like, do we really need this right here? Or, let's understand the outcomes that we're getting with this. Could we continue to get these outcomes with something else within our stack? Or could we replace one or two or multiple products from the stack with something else? I mean, they're looking at doing that as well. So, absolutely, at renewal time, they're doing the same thing. They're doing their due diligence. They're scrutinizing every single dollar that's being spent and understanding, is there a better way we can spend this and improve our security posture with the dollars that we're spending.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to let Tyler or KT get back in here because I kind of monopolized the RSA conversation. I do have one follow-up if nobody has one, but I want to give them a chance first.
No, continue. Go ahead. This is great. I'm just listening and enjoying the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. Supply chain, right, is an interesting one. I think of supply chain a little differently, Antonio, right now. The MSI, UEFI vulnerability at the chip level. We've got some interesting things going around, chip manufacturing. Like, when we think about supply chain, sometimes we think about the finished product, but this is morphing very quickly into the components that are building end products. How scary is some of these new supply chain attacks down at kind of the chip and firmware level?
Yeah, the number of hands that things pass through in order to do business nowadays, whether it be down to, whatever that finished hardware product is, or even just whatever service that you're getting from another provider. It's one of those problems that every single organization is having to deal with. Especially something that lives directly on a component. Like, how do you look for that? How do you ensure integrity of your finished product or finished good when you're getting components from different suppliers and manufacturers? And the same thing can be said about how do you ensure integrity when you're doing, you're getting a service, not even a finished product, but you're getting a service of some sort from one of your business partners as well, that they're taking the proper precautions and have the levels of scrutiny to protect their organization, because something that happens that their organization could potentially affect yours as well. So, definitely a theme, definitely something that's on the top of mind of organizations. At the end of the day, it has at least from what we, for us, the supply chain, at least the way we think of it and the way the customers tell us, is things like, I don't worry about the people that I do. Well, not only do I have to worry about the organizations that I do business with directly, but my supply chain also extends beyond that. It's my supply chain. And that was something that was brought up, not just at RSA, but even previous conferences as well, is the supply chain ecosystem as a whole, whereas some are involved in the chip, the hardware, the finished product, others are involved with the service of potentially that, if not just services in general, and ensuring that they're taking the same level of care to protecting the organization such that they don't do something that puts somebody within their supply chain in a bad position. So it'll be a theme that's going to go on. It'll go on well past this year and into next year as well. And it's definitely something that's top of mind for, again, organization, whether it is something that you're getting a hardware product, a hardware component within there, all the way to a service that you're working with one of your partners.
Do you see that supply chain trickling down into the vendor space, where we're going to be requiring the ability for interoperability, integration, and a lot better collaboration inside the ecosystem between all the platforms and products, no matter what you're using, in order to combat some of this, really difficult supply chain attacks, complexity, adversaries that are just much more sophisticated? Do you think all of that's going to have to play into the vendor space as well, where the integration happens more?
I think we have to. I think we absolutely have to. We have to, it's like, again, we're stronger together. We have to play nice. We have to, we're all fighting the same enemy, and those are those bad actors, regardless of where they are in the world. So as an organization, we have to, the more flexibility that we can build in as a community, and not just the vendor community, just the community in general, the better we're going to be with respect to visibility, with respect to detecting things faster, with this respect to adapting to the new tactics and techniques of the bad actors and the nefarious actors. So, it seems to me like we don't have a choice. We have to do it, or we as a community, as an entire security community, have to do it.
Yeah, we rely on these components for some of our gear that we use to actually offer up security services, right? So, I mean, it behooves us to be part of the solution to this as well, because think about all the firewall vendors and folks that are selling appliances and all the other things. Like, this could have huge impact to these security solutions because they're running on this hardware that potentially could be compromised. I think it's a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Antonio.
I mean, it goes back to, I thought the theme, again, sorry to go back to RSA, but I thought the theme was appropriate, which is stronger together. And that's what we need to be, is we're stronger together.
Yeah, absolutely. Antonio, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me.
Make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Fortra to learn more. Stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to go over the weekly enterprise security news.
Application Security Weekly delivers interviews and news from the worlds of AppSec, DevOps, and all the other ways people find and fix software flaws. Join us as we explore how the latest news highlights modern security practices or reminds us of the missing ones. We also bring insights from interviews on topics from training to threat modeling, from open source tools to cloud-native techniques. Plus, an occasional reference from new wave to synthwave. Find us at securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Application Security Weekly wherever you pick your podcasts.
Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Fortra helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automations. Take your engagements even further by pairing with our additional red teaming tools from Cobalt Strike and Outflank. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra Core Security.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Katie Teitler and Tyler Robinson. Security Weekly community, our teams from Cybersecurity, or from Security Weekly and SC Media were on site at RSA Conference 2023, delivering in-depth reporting, analysis, and interviews from the conference. If you were unable to join us in person or didn't manage to catch our video live stream from Broadcast Alley, access all of our RSA Conference 2023 coverage, including video interviews with leaders from the community. Visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Now for the enterprise security news. Now you can go back to that shot, Gus. All right. So Adrian was kind enough to drop in a ton of articles, so I didn't really need to drop in any because I think we have more than enough to cover. We'll start with some funding news. This first one is SourcePass. It announces $135 million in total funding, but it's only $65 million in new funding to augment what they had already raised, and then they acquire a company called Proxios. Katie, this looks to me like one of those traditional kind of grow through acquisition plays, like seventh acquisition in a short period of time. They're just assembling a portfolio, it looks like to me.
Yeah, I thought that as well when I read the press release, and it's almost like a double entendre here in the press release where they say we're doubling down on our investments in our clients, and yes, they're investing in their clients, but yes, they're also investing in other types of companies that might have potential clients. So I don't know much about SourcePass. But it looks like they're, like we were talking about just a few minutes ago with Antonio, it's one of the ways to pretty quickly build a portfolio and become that suite of products versus the point player, because different people on different sides of the aisle argue, well, it's better to build a point product and have best of breed. But in this day and age, I think a lot of people are just looking for a vendor that can cover myriad capabilities, because if you go to one superstore, it's a lot easier than going to 15 boutiques.
True, but here's the challenge, right, for companies like this, because I lived through this through the Security Weekly acquisition. It takes a while to integrate these businesses together, and if you know anything about what Fortra's done and their platform, like it's taken them years to get to the level of an integrated platform. So I get it that you acquire capabilities, you put yourself in a position, but if these things don't work well together and they don't look like a seamless platform, it's actually I think it will create some struggles more than it will actually solve problems. This is my guess.
I agree. And I think this has been the problem that I've had with like Tomo Bravo and stuff. Like we see all these great acquisitions of actually good companies that have been doing good things for a while with the, I would say, over-expectant hope that they're going to integrate all this and make this one seamless, single pane of glass with all the magic of all 3 of the companies or all 50 of the companies that simplify our lives. But what ends up happening is we end up with a solo umbrella, less dev cycles, because now they've rolled it into the single dev platform of the company. And we're not seeing the innovation because they've been acquired and now they're a private company. So they don't have the same drive and incentive that they did prior to that. So I'm not sure that this is a great thing industry-wide, especially across the board, as we see a lot of these bigger companies just gobbling up all the small companies. And the smaller companies don't have the VC funding money out there to do some of the more innovative and challenging things just because there's not as much money.
Yeah, especially in this market, we're running into that, right? Like the funding isn't quite there. You've got a lot of people who want to do something big, and they were probably hoping. The good news is I read something today about how the M&A market is pretty hot, while the IPO market is completely in the dumpster right now. So at least there's that. But then we get into all of those problems. Yes, it might be easier to acquire, but like you said, there could be a culture fit, and you can do your best on the front end to try to ensure. But once the technologies are integrated, once the teams are integrated, that's not a snap your fingers and it's done kind of thing. It does take a while, so there are pros and cons to each. But with small companies, they're either left scrambling right now and sort of trying to make the best of the situation, or the first really good offer that comes around. I can see where that could be attractive to a younger company.
Yeah, it's interesting on a couple fronts. One, you've got a lot of private equity dollars, a lot of dry powder, and you're starting to see some interest in not just a single take it private or acquisition. They're actually starting to think about this, Tyler, and trying to bring some pieces together. Can they take 2 or 3 or 4 companies, bring them together, get some economies of scale, some efficiencies, and then roll them back out to compete with a broader player? Those are the ones I'd like to see more of. Because when Thoma Bravo takes somebody out like Ping, SailPoint, and ForgeRock, right, the first thing they're doing is they're cutting dollars. They're getting them into a run rate that's profitability, but they're losing innovation potentially at the same time. And if they don't bring these companies together, like, are they just going to flip them back out in the public market when the IPO market comes back out? And the question will be, is there any value left when they go to do that? I know what Logarithm went through after the Thoma Bravo acquisition, and they're still not to a point where they could, kind of exit out of that environment, versus like, let's take 3 or 4 companies, put them together, and then go compete with somebody. That to me is a little more interesting kind of scenario, and I'd like to see more of that.
Now, I'd like to see a lot more of that, and I think it's going to take a very experienced set of leadership to do that correctly in the individual product or asset owners for those particular companies. And it's going to take a pretty big voice, and I would even say market strategy drive from the very highest level of some of those major corporations to get those back into the public sector and get them moving, successfully set them up so that they have that exchange and that value output. Because you're 100% right on that value. It is very difficult to dump all that money for acquisition, bring them in-house, get them connected and rolled into the whole process, and then by then try to figure out how to get value and develop and innovate while doing all that to get them out with some equity. That's a big ask.
Right. Well, that kind of leads into story number 2. BioCatch, the leading online fraud detection platform, welcomes Permira growth opportunities as a significant shareholder, but they're basically buying share from the other shareholders to become the 3rd largest minority shareholder. So this means probably no infusion of cash, because I've been in one of these deals way back when. It's basically buying out a portion of the portfolio. People think there's more money to spend. Actually, there's not. There's no new money. You just have a new investor. And so maybe money comes later, but you got to prove yourself.
It's a new twist on the investment market, right? People are trying to get creative with how they position themselves, since the investments are not quite where they were 2-3 years ago. So it's a creative option for sure.
Yep.
Not without risk.
Yep. Yeah. So here's
the risk appetite has been a little bit lower there too. So we're starting to see some of that that risk appetite correct itself along with the dollar amounts around the risk appetite. So
yeah, and here's the third option, article number 3. Hub Security takes in $16 million. You got to go to the paragraph right above about the Lind partners who invested. Under the terms of the agreement with Lind, They'll have access to $16 million in convertible debt financing in 3 tranches over a 2-year period. So this money's coming in phases, and they're going to have to hit milestones to get access to all that $16 million as a convertible debt. It's almost like a big safe note in some respect, but there's going to be conditions tied to each of those 3 tranches to get to the full $16 million. So again, back to your point, Tyler, how do I reduce the risk? Well, I'll give you access to $16 million, but it's only going to come out like this, and if you don't meet them, I don't even have to commit to the full $16 million.
Which it may lead to some other interesting avenues. Like you're going to have this massive swath of acquisitions to clean up just to recoup some of the money at the end of that if some of these fail. So you end up with some interesting dynamics companies and merger and acquisition pickups that could be a consolidation of bad debt and or companies that did not make some of these bigger deadlines and or numbers, which they all do. There's always some of them.
This is why I am not interested in creating my own startup right now. It just not a very good time to do this because it's creative financing. Katie, to your point, like everybody's looking at ways to get dollars, and all the ways are being very creative. I mean, when I covered this on Security Money a few weeks ago, like large debt rounds, like large convertible debt rounds in the 400 million, like Netscopes was like 401 million. It's all convertible debt. No, it's not. I mean, those are, you didn't see those before, right? Now you're seeing all these really weird ways to structure financing deals. And then Cyber Reasons, down round was just a huge blow to the industry.
Is convertible debt the new SPAC?
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Because we know the SPACs didn't work out.
Exactly. Help us all if they are.
No fake. Like Siren, gone. IronNet hanging on by a thread. Like the SPAC vehicle was not very successful to get into the market. All right, some acquisition news. Databricks acquires Okira on the data governance side. Now, this was a little interesting to me because with large learning models and AI, prior to this stuff becoming more mainstream, right? And we're talking about all this generative AI stuff. There was this kind of concern around data governance and data provenance, right? Like this is going to become I think a big thing because if you're manipulating with the base data that's used to feed these models, then the models on the other end aren't going to be accurate. And so, it's an interesting space. I just don't know how many people are actually focused on it right now.
Yeah, there's bigger problems with the forefront and seeing all of the integration. I would say the ransomware threats being, massive from being able to acquire cyber insurance. Those are kind of playing more into the thoughts of let's say, financial advisors, the executives, and the governance side. I don't think it's taken a backseat because it never does, but it also hasn't gotten the same priority or I would even say weight, because governance for a while was being leveraged by some of the cyber insurance providers and being leveraged for the compliance and or security checkbox. Whether they did more or not was up to them. But the governance side kind of took a back seat where now it's like ransomware protection and making sure you get your pen tests. Are you getting certified via different new mechanisms in order to ensure that you're able to do procurement and get that cyber insurance? So those long plays and change in the way cyber insurance is requiring things, I think, put governance to a secondary position, which causes some other issues long term because they're required.
We'll talk about cyber insurance here a little later with some payouts.
Oh boy.
KT, any thoughts on this one?
No, nothing additional. It's Databricks, they're a mega unicorn, so they've got options.
They have options as long as they keep their cash burn under control. It's all about cash burn, folks.
Can you do that at that scale, that large? Like, Cash burn is a big thing at that size.
It is, and that's what I mean.
They could.
Yeah, I mean that is the biggest thing for a lot of these startups is can they control their cost structures, minimize the burn in order to keep a valuation when they go to the next round. Because look, everything I see, we don't get out of this thing at the earliest. We hit the bottom in Q3 of this year. Most people are thinking Q1 of next year, which means you got to get through the first 6 to 9 months of next year before the markets even start to open up for another raise. So who's got enough cash on hand for the next 12, 15 months? It's all about cash burn at this point. It's a huge metric.
I mean, even a company like Databricks at one point, they were listed at a valuation of 38 billion, and then more recently they're down to 31 billion. I mean, when you're talking numbers that big, my head starts to explode anyway, but that's a lot of money. That's, going from 38 to 31, that's billion. That's not like, the cash I have in my wallet. So if that's accurate, that's a lot of burn.
Yeah, a lot of burn. CrowdStrike Fortinet shares rise in broad security tech rally. Okay, so let's get to this one. I actually did a financial call. So Paul and I we do these periodically. We get on with financial advisors because they all want to get a kind of a feel for what's going on in the market. Right before that call, ZScaler pre-announces their hit, like their overpromise on their numbers, and the market takes off, right? We saw the opposite of this during RSA conference. When Tenable came out, they did their earnings announcement on Monday of RSA conference, hit their numbers, but then said future guidance, we're going to lower future guidance, and all the stocks tank like 10% the next day. Like, the market is very fickle right now. When earnings comes out, you're seeing people get hits for other people either hitting or missing in the industry. It's a little crazy right now. So I can't explain why CrowdStrike and Fortinet see a bump when Zscaler announces, because they're in different markets. Like, they don't even do the same thing. At least with Tenable, you could say, okay, Qualys and Rapid7 might see something similar. Therefore, I'm going to go a little light on the vuln management market. But these three players are in completely different markets right now. I don't know how they impact each other like this.
I don't like it. I really don't like the fact that so much is put on other people's announcements and or the fickleness of the market to determine and or like allow other people to meddle with inside of our companies and the earnings and what stocks do. Like, you think about disinformation campaigns, all of the overseas stuff we're dealing with, all of those bits and pieces, and the fickleness of our market is just setting us up to get to a place where this could cause a catastrophe. And then we end up with like runs on banks, runs on companies, people jumping stocks. Like, this is never a good thing. And I don't like the fact that we have such a fickle market, especially in the tech side of this, because a lot of the stability that the economy is relying on right now is the stability of the tech companies and our tech stacks.
It's reminiscent a little bit of 2001. Things stabilized between, for this 20-ish year period. And tech was always seen either as high growth or slow and steady growth, depending on what tech sector you were in. But now we're going back to it. Is it related to what happened with SVB and some of the other banks that followed? I don't know. That's not my area of expertise, but it is definitely unsettling. It's not unprecedented, though. It's just,
you're right. Yeah. And that's what these financial analysts wanted to know. Like, why is this stuff going on? And it's like, look, Zscaler is in the pandemic put Zscaler in a fantastic position. It just did. Let's just call a spade a spade. I mean, they were set up to support work remote, work from home environments. Like, out of the gate, they saw a huge uptick, right? Great. CrowdStrike saw some good uptick with work from home because they saw the need to install the endpoint on other devices. They got some benefit, but for two very different reasons, right? And then you got Fortinet over here in the corner, right? And so Fortinet's going to fall into the whole bucket of Checkpoint and Palo Alto on the firewall side of the business, which I don't think the firewall business has benefited from the pandemic. I think actually it's a detriment to those vendors because as you see more people working from home, you're seeing the collapse of the corporate at work. Like how many do I need all these firewalls anymore? Like I see that as a negative, but yet all three of these guys somehow gain a benefit because of ZScaler's announcement. Anyways, it's just, this is the stuff that I don't like because I track every single one of these vendors. Like they've been in my Security Weekly 25 index for over 4 years. I've been tracking this data since 2017. I can go back and tell you when Zscaler struggled and when that kind of turned for them. I can look at every single one of these vendors. There are no parameters that correlate these vendors together, but the market sees them all the same, and I think that is a mistake, a big mistake. My 2 cents.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, I see a consolidation, but I also like the fact that we have some additional options at scale here, especially with the firewalls, because we've ran into this place where you've got 3 major players. We're going to end up like cell phones and service providers soon if we're not careful. You know, Palo Alto, Cisco, Juniper, Fortinet, like keeping a little bit of a gap there and maintaining still some semblance of quality and or scalability and innovation, for that matter, that fits multiple price points, allows the small to medium businesses to keep playing and doing and remaining secure without getting cost out on good technology. And then we end up with some really bad things where we get Huawei. We end up with Chinese stuff in here that
Huawei.
We just don't control.
Huawei. You're right. We don't want any of that, especially after all the supply chain stuff.
Very different. I'd much rather be in Hawaii.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Google rolls out passkey support. Anybody going to use passkeys?
Maybe. I mean, I love this idea. I love the adoption. I love the push for anything other than passwords right now, and anything other than passwords with just 2-factor, because we're in a pretty bad spot that's not moving forward. Like we've not been moving forward. We keep seeing breaches with all the ransomware leaking all this data, and the breaches, the security of your password and the number of passwords that are leaked and the ability for attackers to just go buy sessions, buy credentials. We really do have to get to this point faster if we want to make a dent on anything. So I'm all for it. I think this is great if this makes it easier. Like we've got OAuth, we've got FIDO2, we've got apps on our phone, we've got, integrated single double sign-ons with tokens. Like we've got a lot of options. I think it is just getting the general public adopted quicker and more used to doing this. So whatever mechanism that is, and if it takes multiple people and providers to do this and hop on a wagon that's innovative, let's do it. Like I'm all for it.
But it's Google.
They own everything between them, Microsoft, and Microsoft. Yeah. Apple maybe has a little bit of that.
So I was talking to a non-security friend. She actually works at it's a travel company. A college friend of mine opened a Sicily travel tourism group. And so our other friend works there helping manage the tours and the guests and the whole thing. And she's been asking me all along for my unprofessional advice, my professional, unprofessional advice for her company on security. So I got her to adopt a password manager about a year ago, which I was super excited about. Anybody I can convert, yay. So we were talking about this today, and they're having some problems with their CRM. I won't get into it, but they're ridiculous. The company, their privacy policies make me want to scream. They are basically they say you can't store anything private in here because we won't guarantee that you can have any privacy for your data, and if it's breached, it's on you, so we're just going to disallow any PII. It's a CRM. So PII is inherent, right? You need some sort of data on your customers, and some of it's PII. So fast forward, we're talking about this whole issue, and she's telling me about how she's trying to get the company to go to a password vault, a shared password vault where they get, whichever one they choose, and they all have accounts. And she can't convince anybody else in the company because they're like, I can just store my passwords in Google. And she says, well, that's true, but then Google as a browser has access to all this information, and they're mining your data, and they're making money off of you, and everybody else, because they're travel. They're great people who run a great, very successful business. If you want to go to Sicily, go with them. But they could care less about security in that way. And they're like, we're just going to store all of our passwords in Google. It's so easy. And they don't understand the distinction. And I think that's what we're dealing with. And when you have a company like Google saying, hey, just trust us, but they have those two sides of the business. I use Google, I use Chrome, I have an Android phone. I'm not crapping on Google totally, but I know the risks. I think there are so many people out there who are going to see something like this and go, this is great. And they're not going to think about the implications of being owned by Google and all of the data and what that means because it's Google.
I mean, to be fair, if you use a Chrome browser, like whatever you do on that Chrome browser is, part of the data analytics. The passwords and the password list stuff, the way in which they've done the encryption, like they can't see your password. They couldn't get into your password if they wanted to. Now, a ransomware actor, if they put a browser stealer where they can steal the passwords because they're in your session, they have your token for the browser. Yeah, now your browser has leaked all those passwords. Google itself, though, through the mechanisms that they have, unless it's malicious and or via subpoena, the keys and availability of the keys are locally stored. So there's not a way to reverse those. So I argue both ways, and I 100%. I'm the paranoid guy here. I see your point, and I go back and forth, and then I come back to the fact that whatever we're doing to get people to adopt something other than what they're doing as a habit and moving them progressively forward, kicking and screaming, we do have to make those little, like your password vault example. We have to make those little efforts wherever we can so that we can continue to drive this forward, because even the password vaults have vulnerabilities, and we're seeing password vault stealing malware and vulnerabilities. So we've got to continue evolving this quicker. So whatever it takes to do that, I'm on board, and I will support anybody kind of trying to get people from using cat 1 2 3 4
or dog 1 2 3 4. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of a conceptual thing, right? And I agree with you that anything we can do to notch it up just a tiny bit, but conceptually, there's just a little bit of that ick.
But there always is, and I think it's good for the general public to have that wake up call of like, privacy is dead. Like whatever you have on your phone, all the ad tracking data, everything that you're doing, you have no way to be private. So your ability and what you're posting and sharing freely is gobs more than what they're getting from data analytics and tracking. But realizing the situation we've already got ourselves in, and understanding what that means from a legislative stance moving forward for you and your kids, you have to take a little bit broader swipe and understanding, like whether you use their password manager or not doesn't change their data and analytics and or their access. So how do we begin to change hearts and win over the mindset of people to start to care about security? Because I really do think we've pretty much lost the privacy battle. I think that's been gone for the last 5 years. For sure. But you had to dip your toe in that really contentious topic, right? You had to do it. Like, we have to get. This is the investment news. What have you done, Matt? My brain exploding right now.
That's why we have 4 enterprise security browsers trying to replace Chrome. But does that really solve it? Maybe. But you're right. Actually, we lost privacy more than 5 years ago. We lost it with the Patriot Act, right? I was being generous. Yeah. But I mean, that's when we lost it. We lost the privacy battle with the Patriot Act. Let's just call a spade, because that's when it happened. We were down a path of privacy. 9/11 hits. Patriot Act comes out, it's gone. That's why it's being done at the state level and not at the federal level right now. The states are trying to do it, but there's only so much they're going to be able to do. It should be done at the federal level, but it's going to fly in the face of the Patriot Act. But
I mean, to be fair, like even outside of the Patriot Act and like what we do, the government does with that data, we lost that when they monetized the ability to do advertisement with inside of web browsers and put that on web pages. So we can go back to, we're going to call AOL out on this and just say it's your fault.
Who owns AOL now? Verizon? It's their fault now?
Well, Tyler lives up north, so he doesn't care about the Patriot Act.
Right.
I'm good.
Good. Good. Merck might get actually their payout from their cyber insurer. So court has said, no, this is covered as part of insurance. This is not an act of war per se, which is what the cyber insurers tried to claim for NotPetya, because it didn't include any military action. It's an interesting ruling. We'll see if it stays and is upheld. But that's potentially good news for people who have cyber insurance policies. I'm not sure it's good for the cyber insurers as a whole, however.
I'm not sure I care how the cyber insurers feel, or any insurance company for that matter. But I do think this is a good precedent to set, because there were a lot of people in the industry who are getting exceptionally frustrated at the fact that they had to have cyber insurance, but there were so many caveats, there were so many asterisks, there were so many, okay, well, if you don't do exactly what we say, and so I think this is good.
Yeah, this is good precedence, in my opinion. There's nothing good that comes of trying to blame a sophisticated attack, or everything that they call APT. It could be considered a nation state. So now they have a weaselly way to get out of any cyber insurance policy because it's sophisticated in some manner that is not sophisticated at all most of the time. So I think this is great. We've made leaps and bounds with cyber insurance. They're doing good things. Well, some of them, the good ones, are doing good things around pushing people to get proper assessments. Questionnaires are becoming, non-existent. We're actually validating and verifying good security, so people are doing good security. So it's one of the few ways that we have leverage to push security and the security boundary further and further out, so it gets better. And I think that's a great thing. Now, it's still insurance. Let's all call a spade, and insurance will always try to find a way out of paying policy, because this is the first 2 or 3 years that they've ever lost money on cyber insurance. And so it is hitting them kind of where it hurts, and they're having to adjust and make changes, which is great. I think this pushes, but I don't want to see them get out by legislation via precedents.
Agreed. Another good precedent, ex-Uber security chief Joe Sullivan gets probation, not jail time. Also a very good precedent, because first of all, I don't think he should have been charged in the first place, but that's a whole different discussion. But at least from a sentencing perspective, I think it's 3 years probation and 200 community hours or something like that.
That feels right, honestly. That feels a little more just. And let's be real, like, we start sending all these executives to jail that have a lot of money. Like, this doesn't end well for anybody. Like, they're not cut out for that life in any way, shape, or form. And this just ends up as a bad precedent that people just won't take that risk, and we lose a lot of good leadership and institutional knowledge that we desperately need for many organizations right now. So I think it's good.
We were talking last week about the banking crisis, 2007, 2008, and the actual lack of bankers who went to jail, and they tanked the global economy. The global economy. And one guy went to jail. I'm not saying what Joe did is right or wrong or whatever, but seriously, that's what we're focused on, sending a cyber executive to jail. There's something wrong with the system. And so, yeah, thankfully, this is going in a better direction than it looked like it was going for a while.
Yeah, the organization and enterprise and executives that ran that organization need to all be held liable as a group, as one whole, where we are making an example of them and not people. This is institutional, and I think that needs to be brought up and done correctly with the executives that we're all involved. If we brought them all together as an executive group and had, each of them do 200 hours of community service and some maybe more creative punishments with some monetary value hits, I think, taking their stocks, donating those to causes, all of those great things that we could come up with, those would be where I would like to see this get to.
Joe is a scapegoat. Let's be honest.
Yes. Yeah.
If you've ever been on an executive team, you don't act in isolation. You almost can't by default.
Right. Yeah. And it will be interesting, KT, to your point about what's going to happen in the fallout of SVB and First Republic, right? I mean, we're repeating the 2007, 2008 debacle in some respects now. And how many of those executives are going to face this kind of scrutiny?
No, government's just going to bail them out. They're just going to bail them out, and then private companies are going to buy them up. Nobody's going to serve jail time. And they're going to say, well, this is different, and I get it. I understand the differences. But, yeah, nobody's going to jail for that.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Next topic. Could bartenders fill the growing tech needs? I'm thinking the other way around. I'm thinking I need to just focus more time on my bartending skills from the cybersecurity side. So I don't know. Anybody thought this one?
I think there's a lot of places that we can recruit and find good people that have people skills, social skills, the ability to do creative problem solving, tenacious people, all of these, characteristics of hacker security people, information security people. Great. That still does not get them up to speed where we can rely on them in the next 2 years to do a fully capable technical role with the experience and understanding that is required to fill the gap across multiple disciplines. That, like, okay, great. I get what the article's getting at, but at the same time, we can go pick and pluck people from all over. And I think there's a lot of great people in all the verticals. So I don't think it helps our tech gap in any way, shape, or form.
I think it's very optimistic that you could take somebody with the personality that would thrive as a bartender and thrust them into the security field. And it's hard enough for extroverts who work in this field, and they weren't like those kind of people who just thrive on people. We all see what happens at Black Hat and DEF CON and B-Sides, right? I don't think that's a great recipe, pun intended, for success, throwing an uber gregarious type person into this industry. Yes, I get it. We need communication skills. We're not good at that as an industry. We need to be better able to socially engineer each other in positive ways. Bartenders are great at that. But I think taking someone who's almost the opposite of what the security industry is and being like, hey, come to our industry. Those are for cybersecurity marketing teams, not for the tech roles.
Right. I think they're insinuating that we like to drink a lot too in the industry. Guilty as charged. So yeah.
The other Tyler frequently drinks on camera, so it's fine.
I was actually given permission from my CEO, I think it was last week, that if I needed to have a drink after 4 o'clock on a meeting, she was okay with it. Like, good, because with the podcast, it might happen earlier.
I mean, we have to drink because there's such a technology gap, and we know that no one's coming to rescue us. And really, we see we've gotten to that feudalism stage. We're past cynicism, and we're to futility. So, alcohol masks that.
What's past cynicism? What's the level?
Cynicism is like you're only on like step 8 there. We just got a 12-step program. We've got futility, and then we've got desperation, and I don't know what's after that yet. I haven't gotten there.
But I do think you compare cynicism with desperation. It's a good cloak.
Thus the alcohol.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's where the alcohol comes in. All right, let's get to a couple more serious articles here. Let's see. Oak Ridge National Lab uses colors in the Fibonacci sequence to mask OT and grid data. It's an interesting article. It's a little complex though, but I get the basics of it, right? Is they're using other signals as a way to communicate data off of non-IT networks that keeps it hidden from attackers. It's a really interesting concept. I just don't know what its limitations are.
Yeah, I was trying to read and understand because they got into a little bit of the background and math, and then I'm like, okay, so how does that actually improve and apply? Which, I mean, is fascinating, don't get me wrong, and there's a lot to Fibonacci in the math that you can do from it, but what does it actually improve that we're not doing with like heuristics and AI and all, the machine learning stuff? Like, how are they making this better with that? I haven't finished the very end of that because I got stuck on the math and what they're trying to tell me there, but it was very interesting to see them using these types of things.
KT's like, yeah, move on. All right, DEF CON to set thousands of hackers.
I just have nothing to say about math, Matt.
I got it.
She doesn't like math right now.
Yeah, we're talking math. I like this story better. DEF CON to set thousands of hackers loose on large learning models. Heck yeah. Like,
it's going to be very interesting.
This could be very interesting, right? The question is, how susceptible are some of these large learning models to attacks? What kind of attacks? We talked about data governance and provenance earlier. Like, how susceptible are they to that? Like, can that influence outputs? Like, look, there's a lot of buzz around AI and these generative AI models using large language apps. Like, but how valid will they be? Can they hold up to some of the scrutiny? It'll be interesting. So I can't wait to see the results of some.
It's gonna be a disaster, and the media is gonna have a field day and a frenzy on it. I'm gonna tell you, like we've been doing AI hacking, like however you view that, for a little while, and there's been a lot of companies spun up to try and talk through the security implications around AI models. Like, can you taint the learning models? Can you cause the learning models to output and do certain changes that affect other things? Can you do bias based on different input validation strings? So all those things, and that doesn't even take into account the infrastructure and the API calls and ability to circumvent protections, guardrails. There's a substantial amount of testing and vetting yet to be done that I don't think people have quite gotten to the point where they realize how new this technology is, how unvetted and untested it is, because it takes a substantial amount of understanding and even higher math to know where the points are of testing just to get to kind of the entry level pieces of this. So there's not as many people looking at it, and therefore it's not been brought to the attention, but this is a fairly immature model from a security standpoint that will fall down at DEF CON.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. Because when my other two co-hosts are here, they are fanboys. And I get it. But I think we have to proceed with a little bit more caution, especially because we have this issue of being locked into, it's not a monopoly, but a very, very small group of companies that are supplying the technology upon which larger businesses are basing their future revenue streams.
Well, there's limited numbers of models being leveraged for that as well, which companies are sharing between each other. So, like, in order to compute some of those models, they take years, and that's all being shared. So we end up with a taint in one of those. We end up with interesting bias, or we end up like with what we're seeing. Even the mainstream is catching on to the fact that, hey, AI actually outputs falsities and lies to you and doesn't do it based on what you prompt and how good the back-end model that's being leveraged is used. So we're already starting to see some of the fallout of what AI is and the limitations. Now, not to say that that's not going to be overcome. There's multiple models being redeveloped, different things being open sourced and provided, which adds additional data points and creativity and innovation. But from a security standpoint, again, these are all just innovations. In fact, almost none of this is being evaluated from the security side. And people are integrating this into every app out there, like all the SaaS platforms, even our search engines are now integrating this. So the security side of this, I think, is going to be the Wild West for a little while. It's going to be similar to web apps and SaaS as they first came out and were placed on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about security, so maliciousness, that potential is huge. Obviously, I won't go back to the idea of nation states. What's the best way to, just poison your AI, right? And that's so easy to do. But you don't have to even have malicious intent in a lot of cases. And that's the scary thing, because we know that misinformation and disinformation travels faster and broader than actual facts. So even if you take the maliciousness out of it, you've got this poison data set, and the more data it gets, the more likely it is to ingest that. So you have to be super, super, super careful with the models. And then if you have somebody malicious on top of that, all they have to do is have a million bots. They have to be funded by their government and sitting in buildings and owned by their government and told by their government and paid by their government and assured that they're not going to be killed by their government if they do what the government says. Who am I talking about? I don't know. There are no countries out there like that. And we really have to be a lot more careful. So it'll be interesting. I can't go to DEF CON this year, but according to the article, this was my favorite line. The first one, if you haven't read the article yet and you're listening, this year's DEF CON AI Village has invited hackers to show up, dive in, and find bugs. What else do we do at DEF CON?
Right. But it ties into the last article we're going to cover in this segment, which is we know the risks because we think about this stuff. But the investment side, they're going to pour billions of dollars into startups around this before they even know whether there's an issue or not. And I'm going to tie this back together, right? We saw the pendulum shift on the cybersecurity side when the economy went south, right? And things got tight, money dried up, hard to get funding. But people are willing to throw billions of dollars into these startups before they even know whether this is a viable technology. When do we hit that pendulum swing?
So I'm actually writing an article on this. I've been doing a little research on numbers and money, and because the quickest way to get funding right now is just to say use AI. You don't even have to be creating the damn AI. You just have to be using it. And my CMO sent me something yesterday. It's a VC firm using ChatGPT on the homepage of their website. So they're clearly bought in, and I asked it a bunch of questions, and I'm not that smart. I didn't really ask it complicated questions, and for 2 out of 3 questions, it couldn't give me an answer. I asked it about the size of the market.
I can't even get AI to write my emails for me right now. Like, let's be real. As much as I love it, and there's some interesting things you can get it to spit out, and there's some cool analysis pieces. It does look at scripts and stuff and tells you some summarizations and some quick learning. Like, there's all kinds of creative uses for it. It doesn't do any better than my brain does in 15 seconds either. So like, I'm just not sold on the time save yet, and I hope it gets there, but as I keep trying.
Maybe it can catch my typos better than my brain can, but
I mean, it's like I don't know. I tried to get it to do MLA format and help me review a essay for my daughter for school last night. And let me tell you, I'm a much faster proofreader than it is, and it's not very good. So it's like having an intern, and by the time you explain all the stuff you need the intern to do and the detail it needs, I could have just done it, and now I've wasted my time because I have to check it and redo it anyway.
But if you train it, you can have it do the next one, Tyler.
Yeah, I got to train it. I just got to invest the time and be a good mentor. That's the problem.
All right, on the investment time thing, I'm gonna cut us. Thank you, Katie and Tyler, for joining me today. This was fun. I've missed you guys on the show because so much great topics. Thank you everyone for watching and listening this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Stay tuned. We got 3 pre-recorded interviews from RSA Conference 2023 coming up next.
Do the words free time or relaxation sound foreign to you? Perhaps you've been stuck in the office too long, battling cyber threats or worrying about the next strain of ransomware. Let Sophos help provide peace of mind 24/7, 365 with cybersecurity delivered as a service. Because we want you to get back to your weekends, family dinners, and everything in between. And you'll get there with Sophos. Visit securityweekly.com/Sophos to learn more. The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. This is all possible thanks to Fortra's best-in-class portfolio and deep bench of expert problem solvers. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra. Fortra.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2023. We are recording live in Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this interview segment is Brian Kenyon. He is the Chief Strategy Officer for Island.io.
That's right.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So Island's gotten a lot of press lately, out building an enterprise browser. But before we get there, like I'm an app user data guy. Okay. So I love the space, and I think what most people don't realize is that the browser is like the main interface into all modern applications. So it falls in the app realm to me, but I don't think most people think of it as an application sometimes.
Absolutely not. And I don't think most people think of it. It's really just a gateway to your content, whether that just be in your personal life, browsing the internet, or the content or what organizations would consider their data inside the corporate world.
Right. And so we understand the challenges with application security and protecting my applications and all the downstream effects, but we don't think about protecting the browser or how the browser is actually a potential security loophole in the overall process.
Well, I think we've always understood the challenge around the browser. What we've not been able to do is really anything about it. So what we've done as practitioners and as manufacturers of cybersecurity solutions is we've built around it. And so we call it, network DLP, we call it web gateways, we call it next-gen firewalls, we call it CASB, we call it packet brokers. Like, these are all technologies that oscillate around the browser to try to give an organization some control of what it can or can't do.
Right.
But we've never thought about actually just controlling the browser until recently.
Right.
And that's what we've really done at Island.
Yeah. We did make one progress. We did kill Internet Explorer. Finally.
Yes, although, Internet Explorer still lives around and lurks.
Okay.
Microsoft has left a lot of the rendering components on the OS, which is good, because unfortunately a lot of those apps haven't gone away. Some of the largest banks, some of the largest corporations live and die by apps that were written 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
And so having that compatibility back to those previous versions is actually a really important part of our business as an enterprise browser.
So what's the root problem with the browser? Like, if you could narrow it down to one or two things, like what is instinctively just wrong about the existing browser?
The browser in its current form as a consumer-based browser is inherent trust. And so let me take you on a little exercise with this. So you've authenticated, you have your rights to get to the data, you're inside an application like Salesforce, or it doesn't matter, ServiceNow, something an organization's written. Your rights and your roles say that you can see the data. So what does it do? The data renders to the browser screen. Now the problem is, you now have lost all control of that data, because somebody can take a screen capture, they can copy and paste it, they can print it, they can save the HTML. All of your wonderful network solutions do nothing when that end user's on the NPC with the data. And so what the enterprise browser is really helping organizations do is not only get control and secure the browser as a vector, but it's to help organizations secure the data from escaping from all of the channels that have been left unprotected over the years.
So we give people access to the system, but then we give them the loophole by just rendering anything they wanted in the browser, and Now we have a data security problem.
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way, right? Like, think about how a call center was in, kind of the pre-pandemic days. You'd show up for work, you had a desktop computer, you went into almost like a skiff-like environment where you weren't allowed to bring your device in, you weren't allowed to bring paper and pencil in, but you had a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, and a phone. And you got on the phone and you worked with customers all day. Then the pandemic hits and all these people go home. And guess what? They still need to access the same data.
Right.
And so how do you prevent that data from then leaving that session of a browser and remaining on that device? Very hard to do. A lot of organizations had to operate with exceptions just because they had to keep the doors open and the lights on.
Right.
But they knew inherently there was risk to it.
Right. So if I wanted to start from scratch and build a new browser that has all the privacy and security controls in it, where would I start?
That's a great question. In 2020, when we started Island, it had already really taken form that Chromium had become the standard for the modern browser. So Chromium's the open source package that powers Chrome, Edge, Brave, Opera, many of the other variants. And it's really become the standard, not because you believe in Google or Microsoft or any of the other vendors. It's become the standard because of the way the user experience is. The way it renders and paints the screen, the way you can bookmark, save passwords. That's become our favorite. That's what we're comfortable with. So that's become the enterprise browser, if you will, by default. And so that's where we started. We started with the exact same user experience. It's not in the cloud. It's not rendering pixels to a browser.
Right.
It's an actual browser that the end user can leverage.
Because that's been the other approach to this, is don't run the browser locally, run it up in the cloud,
Right.
only show the pictures of it. That would isolate the browser and therefore isolate any potential attacks. Your approach was a little different. Give the end user something on the endpoint to use Chromium as the base, and then create security wrappers around it.
That's right. And so by actually being the browser itself, think of the things that simplify, right? I'm pre and post encryption. So worrying about the cipher and how to break and inspect it and be on the wire and try to figure out, are you really moving data through that channel or not? It becomes really simple for me. I see everything the user's trying to do, and I see everything the web server's returning with. And then by policy, I can determine what's acceptable or not acceptable.
So we don't need a man in the middle.
No man in the middle. It's wonderful.
Yes, it is. All right, so I start with Chromium. What's the first security control capability you put into that new browser?
So we called it last mile controls. And so if you think about what are the things that are missing from your cloud technologies and your gateway and your network technologies, it's everything that happens with that user at the keyboard, at the monitor, right? It's can they copy and paste that data? Can they take a screenshot of that data? So we call these last mile controls because it's truly the controls at the actual action. And so we built those in as our first, which are copy and paste controls. But not just can you copy and paste. Where can you copy from and where can you paste to?
Oh, interesting.
Because it's not good enough to just say I've blocked all copy and paste. You'd see crazy end user revolt, right? And so what we've said is we'll give you the opportunity to build a boundary of data, a boundary of applications where people can share data across them but nowhere else. We did the same logic with print and save and screenshots, and that's something in 20 years of cyber I've never been able to prevent, is somebody taking a screen capture. But thanks to the likes of streaming apps, operating systems like Mac and Linux and Windows have really built in DRM. So now we can call DRM functions and actually prevent the screen capture from actually happening.
It's interesting. So you're actually building almost like a DLP within the browser.
Yes.
Right? Because that's what DLPs are trying to do, right?
Absolutely.
Right? They're trying to control what you can copy, paste, move, save around in this new data security world. But instead of doing it at the endpoint, per se, I mean, you're doing it at the browser, which runs on an endpoint, but you're embedding DLP really into the browser.
Exactly. And at the browser, I can get far more granular than DLP can traditionally get. So I'll give you a great example. We have a call center customer that said, listen, most of my call center employees are still remote. Any PII data, even though the application's going to serve it, I want it redacted by default.
Oh.
Then I want my call center employee to selectively unmask the data they actually require to complete the call. On the back end, we send log files that said, hey, Brian unredacted this data at this time. So you have full attribution as to what happened. But that's something DLP can't do because it's literally looking at packets on the wire saying, is this data okay to be displayed?
Where you're actually affecting the DOM.
You got it.
Right.
Exactly.
So you're doing it right at JSON layer, right?
Now you get it. So now if you think about that, what else can I do? And this is where we integrate very tightly with the business operations because there's many things. You think about financial services sector, you see these big finance companies getting fined because of WhatsApp and LinkedIn messaging, which is unregulated because it's untracked. We can render LinkedIn without the messaging component. We can render LinkedIn without the post buttons. So we can actually exert complete control over what gets displayed to that end user.
So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of cool, right? Because now you're affecting what gets displayed from the DOM based on the JSON that's coming back from the service. But how easy is it to manage then? Because that's the other thing, right, is granular control is awesome, but it comes sometimes with a cost of administration.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And so what we found is, and we're 70 customers deep at this point, which is a remarkable blessing for where we are in our journey. But what we found is a lot of every one of those last mile controls I talked about, because we integrate with identity, it's really simple to say, by your role, here are the things I'm going to allow. And those are all radio button turn on, turn off, select the apps you want to create a boundary with. When you start getting into, I want to modify the application, then yes, there is a little customization to that. But where you're doing it in areas where you have no other choice. You know, you think about an old application that you built 10 years ago, I want to add multi-factor auth. Well, the browser can enforce multi-factor auth. So what's better, doing it there, slight customization, or reconvening a development team to actually go build that functionality?
Right. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting use cases. All policy-driven under
all
the
policy.
covers.
Yep.
So basically, you authenticate into your browser based on who you are and what policies you have. It dictates what gets rendered, what doesn't get rendered, and all the control.
You get we splash a home screen to the user, much like we've been taught with Okta and IDPs. You have this home screen.
Yep.
But it's completely dependent on policy. So, I'll give you a great example. Like my home screen when I'm on my work PC, my managed PC has all of my applications. When I go home and work for my BYOD, there's a few of them that are missing. I can't touch our production environment. I can't do certain things. So because we understand the device we're inherently installed on, benefit of being locally installed, we can actually actuate different policy based on what we're seeing at the OS layer.
Oh, that's interesting. And then you were also talking about customization. Like you can customize the look, the feel. Like every company can have its own kind of look and feel what its browser looks like.
Yeah, so I kind of tongue-in-cheek always say we built the enterprise browser to be your enterprise's browser, and that's exactly right. We envision organizations taking the look, the logo, the icons, the look and feel of the address bar, the dialogue messages that get presented to the end user. All of that can be customized and tuned, so you're giving your employee the experience they expect when they're working at your company.
Benefits of a secure browser? Probably immeasurable?
I don't know how long we have left. In all reality, there's a couple things right off the bat that really strike a chord. Number one, we give you full visibility. So you can imagine, as the browser, we see every action that's taken.
Yeah.
And so organizationally, and this is a policy decision, you can run the spectrum from, I want to record every single thing that user's doing in this application because they're doing a wire transfer, SWIFT, to this person's in their personal health care, I want to anonymize it and not see anything, and only report violations back. And so we can run the gamut. When you think of organizations in EMEA that have to do with works councils, and the works councils like us because we give end user indicators as to whether the organization's monitoring your actions, whether you're browsing privately and anonymously, so you can be very clear on those things. So visibility is a big one, control, and then the other big one is organizations still to this day struggle with unmanaged devices, whether they're third-party contractors or trying to do BYOD. And so we are a very simple way to get a foothold on an unmanaged device.
Right. Yeah, because if you can't get to the application,
what are you
don't
doing?
Get there. Right.
Yeah.
You're not doing anything.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a great way to deal with, the shadow IT discussion is it doesn't exist, or at least you can identify it.
Right off the bat.
And deal with it.
That's right.
And help with the overall asset management problem, which we still have in the industry. All right. Did we cover all of your good
I
features?
swear, you must have hit them all, yeah.
Did I hit them all?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
If anybody wants to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/island RSAC. Thank you for watching and listening.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2023. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview was sponsored by Sumo Logic. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabri, and joining me for this interview is Rhett Dillingham, VP of Product of Sumo Logic's Security Business Unit. Welcome, Rhett.
Thanks, Adrian. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. It's a good topic we've got for today. We're going to talk about security automation as well as some other topics. And I think most people are aware of Sumo Logic, but maybe we start there. We just give a quick synopsis of what you do and what you guys focus on.
Absolutely. We provide a platform for application operations and security operations for continuous intelligence. And here we're talking very much about the news we have around security operations capabilities introduced in the platform.
Okay. Are we allowed to say SIM?
We are allowed to say
that's a
SIM.
component. Obviously, it's not the only thing you do, but
yes,
I think that helps people bucket it in their mind a little bit better.
Yes, the naming in this space has been an adventure, I think, for many firms. And
I work in marketing, so I get it. I totally get it.
We still enjoy the SIM name. Our offering for the security operations use case set is termed Cloud SIM, and formalizing the SIM name and information, literally information management and event management, and what capabilities we offer there, built on our log analytics platform, and have joined that with the Cloud SOAR offering, as we call it, Cloud SIM, Cloud SOAR, and very much use those names. Although there's plenty to be had in naming evolution around here, and so we very much think about our platform as a security operations platform, joined with an observability capability platform for application operations.
And you're probably not aware of this, but I am a longtime customer, but in the free tier.
Okay.
Just for my home lab testing stuff, it's great for that.
Absolutely, because our orientation and history has been make it easy to bring logs in, get initial value, automate as much as possible of collection, and just get to initial value in time to value orientation. We have taken that approach with our SIM as well.
And because I'm already so familiar with it, if I run into a project where I need those kinds of services, like at a larger scale, that's going to be the first thing I go with, because from using the free tier for years, I'm already totally familiar with it. Like I know I can get up and running like that.
Yes, and this is part of being a cloud platform vendor in the security space, is try to make it self-service adoptable as much as possible, so you can take initial steps, trial, feel out what use cases you want to apply, and then we build from there with you.
Yeah, so security automation has been a big topic for a while in security. Certainly everything's very dynamic. The threats that we're chasing, I think maybe 2 years ago, Jay Jacobs and Wade Baker did an analysis of what the top topics were at RSA for many, many years. Sure. And just the fact that they're constantly changing, I think is evidence of how challenging it is to stay on top of things. So automation seems natural to reach towards. We can't always get the talent that we need, and it's, just staffing, there's overhead associated with products and things like that. So just kind of tackling that people aspect of automation. I think there's two main things I want to dive into here. And, first is obviously somebody has to create the automation in the first place. You have to make sure it works. Whether you're talking about SOAR or you're scripting something between APIs manually, there's a certain talent that you have to have for doing that. And, making sure it works correctly. It's got to be monitored. If it breaks someday, somebody has to notice and go fix it, right? So how do you tackle that whole people component to it? And then the next thing after that I want to get to is automation itself is scary. Telling anything to automatically happen in production, can come with consequences.
Sure.
So let's tackle the people aspect first.
Sure. Let's just step up that stack that you enumerated there. So first of all, we have come at the space from a cloud platform vendor perspective, alleviating the security teams from having to operate their own stack. We take that operational ownership on. They can focus on value derivation from that rather than having to spend resources in operations. Second, take that into collection, where there's an opportunity to integrate cloud to cloud for data collection. We're just offloading that work from the customer in a way that's just alleviating them of that operational alerting and so forth from their collection side onto us. And then they just have to be aware of what's going on in the source of that data. From there, you can get into, okay, I'm working through the end-to-end security operations workflow from collection to detection to investigation and response. What can I automate in this chain? And there tends to be an over-rotation towards the investigation response portion.
Yeah.
When we've put a lot of focus over the past few years into how do we automate as much as possible of investigation by clustering what we know better than anyone else from that information and event management perspective into what is a refined, true positive alert.
Yeah.
As much as possible on behalf of that person. So
you're talking about reducing my 30-tab workflow down to maybe 1 or 2.
Exactly. And then once you start into the further tabs, you're into investigation and response, where we want you to be able to easily compile information into that platform. Enrichment is the next sort of example. So this week, Sumo Logic is announcing that we've integrated the workflow automation portion of our Cloud SOAR offering as part of our SIM. Mm-hmm. So we're providing a stepping stone short of full SOAR adoption for users to take a next step in automation to go from, yes, I've clustered entity relationships around the investigation work I'm doing in triage, and now I'm automating enrichment into that alert and refining it. And then from there, I can automate notifications. It's sort of the stepping stone of what automation should be, and investigation response to complete that workflow. Then from there, we can get into more complexity and what SOAR has classically addressed, and our Cloud SOAR very much does, in those other aspects of complex manual and automated workflows.
Yeah, definitely. And it's I remember the first time I used a SIM that just pulled in like reverse DNS for an IP address. Such a huge time saver, especially if I'm looking at a ton of data. Like I don't have to have this command line open, in another window or some kind of DNS lookup tool in another window, and just one at a time trying to piece together this picture. Just all these little bits of data you have to go out and collect.
Yes.
And I think SOAR has been huge for that. And even without SOAR, like a lot of the modern tools will just automatically pull in that data, so you just mouse over or something like that.
Yes, and in a
lot of important UX and UI design there too, right?
There is, and SOAR came to be defined in a certain way versus SIM in the technology stack for security operations in a way that lumped a few technologies together and a few feature capabilities together in a way that has made it unapproachable for a certain segment of enterprise, and that jumping off point has been too difficult for many. Mm-hmm. And just having conversation this morning with a firm that has wrestled with when they're ready for that. Mm-hmm. And so I think as we think about security operations utilizing a platform, we want to make those incremental steps more granular and easier to adopt and utilize. And so that's hence back to our taking that workflow automation, making it easily and complementary available in our Cloud SIM, just to help further that along, regardless of the nomenclature of what is SIM, what is SOAR. It's a platform for security operations.
Right. And it occurs to me maybe the automation being scary thing isn't as much of an issue for you guys, since you're not changing security configurations and things like that. We're not changing production stuff. It's mostly you're ingesting event data, things like that, and the automation we're doing is on that. So there's not a whole, or correct me if I'm wrong, there's not a whole lot of danger to implementing automation in that work.
You're very much right. Another vector of the concern with adopting what has been considered SOAR technology has been the risk of over-automating and automating something beyond what the organization and the culture are ready for in automated response specifically. And really the way we think about that is you should be automating the work as much as possible for the efficiency of the resource challenge that you have in the staffing, training, and retention, and then stepping towards your first most common automated response types in that in that order, from enrichment into notifications to other systems, and then into response, just to make this more iterative, incremental, in efficiency gain for the team.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how sick are you of people asking how you're going to implement ChatGPT and large language models into?
Not at all.
Some of this work?
Because
not there yet.
No, we have. We have also announced that this week that we've integrated via our integrations framework for our SOAR into a ChatGPT provider of your choice. Mm-hmm. We have set up the out-of-box integration configuration for how you utilize the Q&A and chat capabilities. Just to bring that the knowledge of the internet modeled via that technology into the platform, so the users who are variably familiar with the utility of that can gain value from it, and the iterative questioning and whatever the responses are that are being utilized is captured within the investigation and the incident response.
Do you have any quick examples of what some of those use cases are? Is it things like, tell me what protocols run on port 445, typically, and TCP 445?
Generalized, yes, in that sense. Or, we're collecting from a variety of sources in alerts or raw data. And once you're into, I need to apply that to a certain technology, I can go pull in what are the normal or like most common remediation methods for that technology. Okay. And just surface that as readily available, and in part alleviating the tab proliferation. Yeah. This is in one part definitely making sure that it's brought in to the user that might not be aware of the value of the information that's available via that technology, and the other is just compiling more into the platform so it's available in a single place without having to roam around across tools, which is another major theme in CISO land and security team land, is this tools consolidation.
And with my product hat on it, as I'm thinking about this, all you need is like a ChatGPT iframe or something like that, and they bring their own API key. You don't even have to feed the knowledge base.
Correct.
Because it's already in there. Like OpenAI has already done that work. Like you don't even have to feed it security-specific knowledge for that to work.
As long as you're comfortable with the value of the information coming from that corpus. Right. When you decide to contribute to that corpus is up to you.
So do you put a disclaimer like about hallucination and things like that? Like when you use this, it could make things up, right?
That is an organizational decision. If you've already decided this is useful, and you're just now into the iteration on how do we make sure that the questions we ask and how we templatize those are most useful for the team, we're capturing those and enabling you to set that up to be automated and available to each user, rather than you have specialists who figured this out and the others aren't using it.
So we've got just a couple minutes left. So I just want to. This will be like a speed round. Just maybe hitting some high points of what kind of things are you hearing from CISOs that they're struggling with today, and what are they going to be struggling with in the next 2 to 3 years? And is it mostly people bringing large language models to train on internal data? Because that's just been kind of that's my prediction. So I'm just throwing that out there that companies are going to start building these models internally and probably shoving the wrong data into it.
Well, I think that's on the outer band of what's out? Just core. I think there are some who are getting into that realm, but core starts with the efficiency and efficacy of the team, and that gets back to the automation topic and just in effect tool consolidation. Yeah, is a common theme, especially as the macro environment may continue to shift economically. So we are very much in a platform vendor orientation, bringing together SIM with the technology of SOAR integrated, and now we've layered UEBA capabilities on top of that. Essentially delivering modeling for user and entity behavior analytics in a much more accessible, addressable addition to our security platform than it has been as a standalone tool. So this aggregation of capabilities from a security operations point of view is addressing a tool consolidation interest that continues to come up in that sense. The other theme, sort of short of the how are we applying modeling in the development of own corpus and sort of that realm, how are we applying security operations across the company versus in our application development sphere? So as a vendor of observability and security platform use, where those two use cases can join in various ways. I mean, we are very much aggregating these technologies in a way that we're building a bridge between those two needs. So we're addressing the consolidation of alerts that come from the proliferation of tools in application security environments, and applying the clustering that we do and the technology like behavioral analytics that's immediately addressing, where the company security operations realm can help the application security operations realm with their needs. You can immediately apply first seen event modeling to your development lifecycle tools. These are very much similar needs, applying similar tech where applicable. Yeah. So that's theme two. So tool consolidation, bridging between security operations and company-wide versus application. And then we're into, how are we applying AI? So we've applied machine learning in various ways. We aggregate customer information on an anonymized way, and then model what is generating these clustered alerts that are aggregated across entities of what we see, and can indicate for triage value where we're more likely to find for you that you're going to see a true positive versus a false positive.
Right.
And work from there. Yep.
All right. Well, good stuff. Thank you, Rhett, so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Adrian.
To find out more about Sumo Logic, please visit securityweekly.com/Sumo Logic RSAC. If you can't stick around for the rest of the live stream or you're catching this afterwards, head on over to securityweekly.com/RSAC to find all of the RSA conference coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance.
All right.
Thank you, Rhett.
Thank you, Adrian.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2023. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview was sponsored by ZScaler. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today for this interview is Deepen Desai, Global CISO and Head of Security Research for ZScaler. So that's a really interesting title. I know CISOs are kind of a special breed at a vendor, right?
Right.
But you have all sorts of different mixes of looking out for the security of your own company, also being an evangelist, working with sales and helping to explain and sell the product, and but also you've got the head of research title.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your role there at ZScaler.
Absolutely. So it's definitely an advantage to be a CISO and head of security research on the vendor side. I have a global team of 200 plus experts.
Wow.
They're tracking threat landscape. They're continuously monitoring what's out there. And the goal is two-pronged, right? One is obviously we want to make sure the integrity of our own infrastructure is secured. But at the same time, we're also innovating our product, our detection technologies to keep up with the evolving threat landscape. So if new stuff come out, we want to make sure we're ahead of the game in blocking those, defending those, and helping organizations that rely on Zscaler to protect themselves.
Right. And I understand as part of that research, you have a new report out on phishing. What's the name of the report?
Yeah, it's a phishing threat landscape report. We do an annual one every year around this time frame. We also have a ransomware annual report that goes out in mid-year. But for phishing report, the goal was to study all the campaigns that we saw over 2022 and then also compare it to the year before. What changed? How are the threat actors changing their tools, tactics, and procedures? And why are we seeing so many of these attacks becoming successful? Phishing is important because it's the starting point. None of the attacks are now where they send the final malware payload in an email as an attachment and call it done. It starts with phishing, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's ransomware, whether it's info stealer, whether it's nation state. They want to get that initial foothold established, and that's where phishing is, in majority of the cases, the first delivery vector.
Yeah, and I imagine when you do this report, like some of the things, maybe the stats are a little bit different, up and to the right, maybe down a little bit, maybe the industry's gotten better at something. But what stood out the most to you? What really did anything really pop out this year?
Yeah, so in terms of raw volume, it continues to grow. We saw almost 47% increase in number of phishing attempts. And these are phishing attempts targeting enterprise users. Right? These are large global enterprises whose employees are being targeted. So 47% increase in those attacks. In terms of brands that these threat actors are leveraging, we saw Microsoft at the top, no surprise, because they have a lot of properties, right? Like SharePoint, OneDrive, Office 365.
So it's like the skin of the phishing email is what you're talking about when you say brands?
The
theme.
Yeah, exactly. Which credentials are the bad guys after? So Microsoft was at the top, and then it was followed by things like Binance, the crypto exchange,
of course,
right? Wherever they're able to make cash, right? They're going to go after that. And then, like I said, I mean, phishing is just a starting point. Like it's a
initial foothold. Yeah,
full supply chain model where these gangs will establish that initial foothold and sell that access to the next level operators, who will then leverage that access for their call to objective, be it ransomware, be it stealer. Right? So that's how it functions. One of the key things that we noticed was, and I'm going into a little bit of specifics, but leveraging automation, machine learning to conduct some of these attacks. One of the campaigns that the team saw was around job scams. And this job scam is not new. It's been around for quite a while. What we saw over the last 2 to 3 months is these groups were taking advantage of the layoffs. It's kind of cruel.
Oh, yeah.
Right? All the layoffs that are happening in the tech industry, and they will monitor LinkedIn. They will monitor the companies that are still hiring. They will mirror those job postings on a newly stood up domain, which is very similar to the hiring company. And then they will start targeting these victims that were laid off, and they're like, I'm looking for a job. You will be able to find those on sites like LinkedIn.
Right.
And then once they are able to convince the victim to apply for the job, they now have a lot of sensitive information about the victim.
Yeah.
They will actually go ahead and conduct an interview where they will have the picture of a real recruiter from the hiring company used on their Skype profile. And the interview, victims will always pass the interview. They will get the job. And then they will ask them to pay a deposit, right? Something to get the IT equipment shipped to them. It's all refundable, but they never get the refund.
Right.
So that was one of the, I would say, cruel one, but
having to pay to start a new job is the key red flag there, right?
It's a key red flag, and some of them caught it.
Wait a minute.
Exactly. The other one, and this is something I'm actually presenting at RSA on Thursday. One of the talk track is around how these adversaries are able to bypass MFAs. And that's where the
if I can just preface that, years ago we thought, hey, if we rolled out MFA, like this whole attack vector is going to go away, right? But it didn't happen.
Yeah, we're away from that. Like last year, people were saying, I was talking about, hey, gone are the days when you tell your users that, hey, there's this green padlock sign and you're all secure. That's no longer the case, right? Because they're using Azure, Google, AWS, their hosting sites.
IP addresses,
right? And the certificates are wildcard certs that are issued by Microsoft or
Let's
Amazon.
Encrypt.
Exactly, or Let's Encrypt, exactly. So in case of these adversary in the middle attacks, they're literally doing man in the middle. And the victim receives the phishing link. When they click on it, they are brokering the connection to the actual destination. So you receive a phishing email asking for your Office 365 credential. You click on it. You see a page that is very, very lookalike to Microsoft. It may be hosted on, say, Azure, which has Windows.net at the end, right? So very hard for...
Looks legit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your enterprise has MFA implemented, for instance, right? It will also ask you for that MFA token. And that's where you use your Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator app, and you enter the MFA. The kit will then connect to Office 365 or Google and establish that authenticated connection.
Really?
Yeah, and
they need what, at least two codes for TOTP to capture?
They just need one, just one MFA code, right?
Okay.
As soon as you enter it, they will
because
be
they're logging in as you.
Exactly.
Ah, okay. I see.
Then they're able to persist that connection because, hey, remember this device option, right?
It'll create like an OAuth token or something like that.
Correct.
So they can keep it open. Yeah.
Correct. And that's where, look, when they have access to your mailbox, the exposure is still contained to you.
Then they can reset all your passwords to all your other things because the reset mechanism works through your email.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The evolution we saw over there was they also started targeting things like GitHub. Now, it's not the single user getting targeted, it's entire organization that is at risk because your IP information is now available for them to exfiltrate using those established sessions.
Well, that's what we saw happen with ransomware too. Ransomware used to be individually focused, looking for $400 here, $500 here, $1,100, and then they realized they can hit a whole company.
Yes.
And do extortion at a much larger scale. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. So yeah, the AITM is definitely another rising trend. And then the final one, and this falls under the AI/ML and automation piece as well, is where they're starting to use a combination of smishing and vishing as a vector to convince victims into clicking, performing certain financial transactions. And this falls under the business email compromise, right? They will have your CEO or your exec's voice recorded or recording. They will be sent as a voicemail to the victim. Hey, this is Deepen Desai. And then it just cuts off. And then they will follow it up with a text message saying, hey, I'm in an area where the network is really bad. Can you do X, Y, and Z for me? Right? And that's how they have been successful in many of the cases. So that's another one that we're tracking actively out there.
I've received a lot of the hey, I'm Doug Manoni. I'm stuck in a meeting. I need you to buy a bunch of gift cards for me or something like that.
Right.
And he's the CEO of Cyber Risk Alliance, and yeah, we've seen those before too.
So those are text messages, but now imagine you hear your CEO's voice coming in your voicemail, right? And you know that voice, right? Oh, okay, that does sound like my CEO. So that adds that additional
realism.
layer. Yeah, exactly.
Again, the red flag. When has a CEO ever asked you to go buy a bunch of gift cards? Right?
Exactly. Yes. So, yeah, that brings me to what the organizations can do in this case, especially this scenario that we just discussed. I mean, training is definitely number one, right? And training has to evolve. The green padlock piece that we discussed is no longer true. Nor can you train them, hey, these text messages and all. You need to have continuously updated training that tells your employees about what's out there in the threat landscape. So this should also include your phishing simulation exercise.
So you walk them through like the real scenarios we've been talking about, right?
Exactly. And then the security controls that you have in place should be leveraging those zero trust underlying principles where you're able to do two things. A, you're able to educate the user at the time they're about to make a mistake, right? So alerting them, hey, you're about to visit a site that's not safe. Don't enter your credentials. Don't download your files. Don't upload anything sensitive.
I think one of the biggest things in the last 10 years that happened is just a little thing in your email that says this came from an outside organization.
Exactly.
It's just a bit of text that's added to, the body of the email. But that's huge when it's trying to pretend like it came from inside.
Absolutely. And now imagine that similar notification or assistance in line on the network layer itself where you're about to connect and you see a page that says, hey, you're about to visit a destination that's not safe. So do not. And that has helped a lot of organizations globally. It's there. The organization needs to configure that. We offer that to our customers, and it has resulted.
It's like a secure web gateway function?
It's a secure web gateway function, and you need to have the cloud-native proxy architecture to kind of intercept, terminate the connection, make a connection on their behalf, and then you're able to
Or more of a CASB then?
No, this is inline CASB. I mean, you could call it CASB, but it has to be inline. You
Forward proxy.
Correct,
Gotcha.
The second thing is, and I'll hit up on the zero trust principle here. This is where me wearing my CISO hat, how do I look to secure my own environment? And when I talk to other CISO security execs, I always talk about 4 building blocks of implementing zero trust. Number one is, what can you do to reduce your external attack surface?
Yeah.
When an adversary is trying to plan an attack, they look at what all things are visible, whether it's your VPN, your public-facing assets, your cloud workloads. They start from there. So you need to have technology in place that allows you to reduce your external attack surface. Number 2 is preventing that initial compromise.
Yeah.
You need to have consistent security policy no matter where your users are, whether they're at home, in office, or at RSA conference, right?
Yeah.
You need to have that policy follow the user. Number 3 is where assume breach scenario, right? Which is the fundamental zero trust principle.
Exactly.
If your asset were to get compromised, it should
What
not...
can you jump to?
Correct. The blast radius has to be contained to that asset alone. That's the true fundamental principle of zero trust.
Otherwise, you're not doing zero trust.
You're not doing zero trust. And then finally, they're all after your data, right? So anything that egresses your assets, your servers, your endpoints, they need to go through a true inline data loss prevention engine. Right? And that's where, again, cloud native proxy architecture allows you to intercept those, apply your EDM, IDM-based dictionaries and block. Even in case of ChatGPT, like a lot of the organizations are leaking out.
I was going to say, we got a minute left. We got to fit in ChatGPT.
I know, that's the buzzword for this time. I mean, it has tremendous potential. We're leveraging it for solving many of the use cases. We're ahead on the threat detection side, AI ops, bunch of other. We're also guiding our customers on how to use it safely. But then at the same time, there is the risk of exfiltrating data inadvertently. So we've evolved our product to allow organizations to prevent that data exfiltration, which may be not intentional, right?
Or intentional.
Or intentional, right. So the goal over there is to allow the organizations to prevent that exfiltration, at the same time enable them to harness the power of large language models.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Excellent stuff. And we're right on time. And thank you so much, Deepen, for joining me today and letting me chat with you about this report. If you go to securityweekly.com/ZScaler RSAC, you can find a link to this report and learn more about ZScaler. And if you can't stick around for the rest of the live stream or you're catching this afterwards, head on over to securityweekly.com/RSAC to find all of the RSA conference coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance. Thank you again, Deepen.
Thank you.
Yeah.